Good evening, good folks, and welcome to the City of Muskegon City Commission work session for this Monday, May 13th, 2024. Before we get on with our business, note that we have public comment reserved for the end of this meeting. We encourage you, if you do wish to give public comment, to use the comment form at the back of the room at that table. Please provide your name and home address. Note I will not be asking you to share your home address publicly, nor will I be announcing your home address. That is for our records. And please provide the comment form to our clerk's office at the end of the dais here. And when it's your turn to speak, I'll call you up, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to write your remarks. And we do also accept public comment by phone. So keep an eye out for a phone number scrolling at the bottom of the screen when we are approaching public comment time. All right. Roll call, please.
Mayor Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Kilgo,
Here.
Commissioner Keener, absent, Commissioner German,
Here.
Commissioner Gorman,
Here.
Commissioner Cochin.
Where did I hear that?
She was coming from the hallway.
Oh. Here, in the nick of time. All right. First order of business. Taste of Muskegon and Lakeshore Art Festival transition to lab events. I'll wait till Commissioner Cochin gets seated and we'll proceed.
I'm also here, Madam Clerk.
Oh!
Oh, did I not call you? I'm
Sure did it.
Vice Mayor St. Clair
Vice Mayor St. Clair.
is in the house.
Here. Sorry.
All right.
Welcome. Welcome, good sir. If you please introduce yourself.
All right, I'm Kyle Krachewski, Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Muskegon.
So you can be reporting out on this item this evening?
Yeah. So yes, when I started here as Director of Parks and Recreation, we had a lot of movement to do within the city, within a lot of events and activities going on, and some staffing as well. And so that started off with 2 recreation coordinators that we received that were transferred from like the event division of the clerk's office. And with them came a couple of large events that we are asked to run. So that's Taste Muskegon and Lakeshore Art Festival. These programs have some history in the city and were moved around a couple times. So in 2018, Taste Muskegon was transferred under the city from what was downtown Muskegon now. And so I know that during COVID, that was brought under the city to make sure that it stayed alive. And Lakeshore Art Festival was transferred or given to us from the chamber in 2021. So we host these events. It's a pretty large burden on our staff. We want to do a great job with them, and they just take a lot of work, a lot of man or woman power, which we are putting into them. However, we were approached from a private group called the Event Lab, who would like to take these events under them and run them successfully or more successfully than we are running them. And they are here tonight to present and talk a little bit. And there's a slideshow prepared as well to give some more information. As far as the funding, the costs, financials with it, Tastes brings in around $50,000 of revenue each year. Lakeshore Art Festival, it breaks even or makes a little bit of money, and that funding it is helpful. However, it's the capacity of the rec department isn't going to be growing, or getting new employees anytime soon. So at the current capacity, we're pretty maxed out having these 2 large events in June. We'd like to be able to run programs, be more involved in the community programs. So that's what we like to put our attention towards. And I guess it's also, we're not just giving it away to anybody. I'm pretty confident in the group who has a proposal that they would do a great job, and the general public would see no different with the event. So I will let them come up and show you guys that proposal, and then of course I can come back up and we can talk about some details there.
All right. If the individuals with lab events wish to come up and address the City Commission, please introduce yourselves.
Yes, my name's Alan Serio. I'm here with Brent Mullen and Lisa Kraus, and we represent Event Labs. We are all residents of the Muskegon area. we're going to kind of present today a transition plan for Taste of Muskegon and the Lakeshore Art Festival. So give me just a second here. Let me kind of pull this up here, and we'll walk through what we're thinking about. Let me know if that pops up. I think it is. It's not showing here. Let me turn
Not
this
showing
real
your
quick.
end.
Over from this thing.
We see something.
Yeah.
Says Event Lab Taste of Muskegon Lakeshore Art Festival, Section
Yeah,
1.
do you see that?
qualifications.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, I'm sorry, it just doesn't show it on our site, so no problem. So this is a proposal.
If you could
Go
just,
ahead.
just a second. Even if it's not, well, we would like it to show up there and also on television if possible.
Yep, is
Um,
it?
If we could.
Yeah, of course. I don't know why it's not.
I can try moving it back. It's switched. Let's just see if it's. It shows for a second.
It's weird.
Yeah, we're getting some kind of error message that I don't know what it is.
Could you? It's in the packet. Could you go through?
I was just.
I have physical copies of it as well.
Yeah. It's in our digital packet, so we might be able to bring it up, but you just have to let us know when to change the slides. So.
Okay.
A-
Okay.
A little clunky, but at least then we can probably see it on TV.
There's 3 sections to it. I was just going to advance to section 2. Oh. Yeah, they have one on here. I'm not sure if that will help or not.
And again, we have it on our end.
You have it on your
We
end?
can
Okay.
see it.
We have it over
They
here.
just can't see it out
Right,
in
I
TV
think-
land.
Or in the audience.
Right.
It'd be ideal if
Yeah.
the public can see what we're seeing.
Most definitely.
I'm not sure what you.
We're
Just a second.
trying to
Okay.
see if we can do things.
And I can let you know when we advance the slide if they're able to pull up. Oh, it's
Can you
there
see it
now.
up there? That's me.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, and so I guess we'll just kind of go slide by slide here. I was going to go down to section 2. So section 1 is really a background about us, and I can walk through that if you'd like to see those slides. We can, but section 2 really gets into the proposal itself. So first couple pages are just that we're submitting it, who is actually submitting it, and what we're submitting for, just the scope of the project itself. As you go down a little bit more, it really starts to talk about the 3 of us individually and our backgrounds. I'll start with myself. My name's Alan Serio again. Myself and Brent Mullen were the original founders of Taste of Muskegon. So when we talk about qualifications for just that event alone, we were the creators of that event. Lisa has also been with Taste of Muskegon for many, many years. Brent and Lisa are current board members for Taste. I also am the founder of Burning Foot Beer Festival, which is a longstanding festival that's here in the city, and I'm also the owner of Wonderland Distilling Company in Lakeside. So we have a lot of investment, not only from business and development, but also from social responsibility and event creation in the city here. And we feel between the 3 of us that we are very qualified to help with this transition from the city of Muskegon back into a nonprofit of 3 individuals that want to see the success of this event for a very, very long time. We are very rooted in it right now, and we want to continue to see that happen for us. So the first slide, section 1, really just talks in detail about the background, about who we are and why we care so much about this. So if we want to advance down to section 2, we would really talk about the transition out. So if we get into section 2, you can go ahead and go to the next slide here. We really talk about where we're at. We're going to go quarter by quarter into this, which really talks about the city of Muskegon, who's responsible for what at this point. So right now, for 2024, on both events, the city of Muskegon would still run point on all of those. They would still be doing the event production and management, and then our team would then be there to observe and start to attend those meetings, doing an introduction to everyone, letting them know a transition is happening, and then as the event happens, Q3, we would be on the ground with them, working with all of the other captains, co-captains, chairs, committee members, presidents, whoever is going to be part of that board, and working in detail with them to understand their role, how they're producing this festival, what things are good, what things are bad, how we can try to make them better, and we're basically there every step of the way, sun up to sundown with them. As we get past that festival, Q4, we would do a review of all good and bad and financial for the event. And after their fiscal year ends, this would be a clean break for the city. At the end of that fiscal year, city will be done. Event Lab will then take on the responsibility, the financial responsibility of producing this festival for 2025. We would ask any city employees that were there that want to continue on to make sure the transition goes good, that we're more than glad to have them on the board with us. We understand they have other responsibilities. So I don't know from a city side if that could be part of that scope or not, but we don't want to make the clean break seem like, hey, this is it, thank you for your time, but we want to ensure that the transition goes as smooth as possible. But starting for 2025, we would start to run the point on those. Obviously, we're very involved with that, and we are in contact with some of those other boards now to ensure that the boards stay in place and that everyone's prepared for that transition. So then as we go through 2025, Q1 and Q2, we are back into event production, making sure that we're dealing with all of our vendors, we're dealing with any subcontractors, electricians, event rental companies, restaurants, artists, whoever needs to be there, that we're in contact with them, letting them know that we are the point of contact moving forward. So that's the treetop approach to the transition plan. Again, there are a lot of details into that. If we advance to the next slides, we kind of break those down. Go ahead, Nan, if you want to go to the next one. We start to break those down into each area, what we're going to be doing, how we're going to audit that area, how we're going to work with the chairs, the committee members, the people responsible for each one of those spaces, how we're going to do the deep dive into that. There was a conversation earlier today with Lakeshore Art Festival and some of their board members that really want to ensure that we're doing the deep dive with them as they talk to hundreds of artists that are coming in from all over the country. What are the dynamics that they have to see? What are the struggle points that we have? How can we help make that transition work well for them? So we're going to go through each one of those one by one. The three of us are going to divide up those responsibilities, and we're going to work through the existing boards that are there. So we're not wanting to disrupt those things. We're trying to ensure that there's a very even and smooth transition from city to Event Lab. So the next two slides just explain that, and if you want to go ahead and advance on past that from there, then we get into if the event makes money, what do we do? So one of the things that we are very passionate about is community responsibility, and we believe in a many, not one position. We already exercise this for Burning Foot Beer Festival. We have 6 nonprofits we work with through that event. So we find ways to build value add inside the event itself. For a good example, one of the things we do at Burning Foot is we have a flip-flop, coat bag, whatever, check-in, and it's right inside the door. So if you want to go barefoot in the sand, you can do that. And that check-in process is run by Noah's Project. And everything that goes there goes 100% to them. We pay for the tent, we pay for the setup, we pay for everything. They simply bring their volunteers, run the check-in, and everything they collect goes straight to them. We have a carnival game area that we build all the carnival games. You can go out there, you can play those games. We have a big operation game. They're a lot of fun. Customers love to engage with them. All of the profits go to the Jaeger Foundation there. We have a bike rental place where if you're riding your bike down, you can check your bike in. That goes to Boys and Girls Club. We have a pretzel necklace area. Those pretzel necklaces, very common at beer festivals, those goes to Kids Food Basket. So we find ways to bring value to the customers that are coming to that, and those all go to nonprofits. We will continue to find ways inside of both of these events to keep integrating more and more nonprofits into the mission that's here. So that is the many, not one approach that we want to take. We did have one nonprofit that was talking about helping co-produce this, and that was United Way. We've had a great conversation with them. United Way really didn't want to be in the burden of having to produce the festival, so we had an offline conversation of, let's still make this a win-win, where you'll be one of our prime nonprofits that gets benefit from this. So if the event makes money, if you help us give volunteers, we'll also help make sure that there is a donation check going to them. So we have a great relationship with them, and we're gonna have a great relationship with a lot of other nonprofits that are there. But just know that United Way was one of the other organizations that was looking at trying to produce this. We've already talked to them, and there's been an ongoing conversation with Christine from their organization, and we have a great understanding moving forward as well. So just know when we take on this responsibility for producing it, we're taking everything into account. We're taking the existing boards that are into account. We're taking the community impact that this has. These two events have been around for decades, and they mean a lot to the community. They mean a lot to the businesses downtown. They mean a lot to the businesses outside of downtown. They mean a lot to everyone that's here, and they mean a lot to the nonprofits. So know that in that transition, that is one of the things we think about every day, and we're ensuring that that will not get lost as this transition happens as well. At the end of that, we're open to any and all questions. We'd love to answer those as well, and Brent, Lisa, and I are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioners? Questions for the presenters at this time? Commissioner Cochin?
Yes, thank you so much for coming out today, guys, and for putting this wonderful presentation together. I was really excited to hear that you guys, are in charge of Burning Foot and Wonderland. I think those things do bring value to our community in some ways, and so, and especially knowing the nonprofit work that you guys do. But one of the big things that I am kind of wondering, so when I was reading through the packet, the amount that you guys are asking for to contract was $25,000 for each event. Is that correct?
Yes, is a one-time transition gift. So before events get produced, there's a lot of outlay of cash. So in that transition, at the end of the fiscal year, you're going to have profit that helps separate that, and then we have to produce that festival. So we have deposits going out, we have nonprofits, we have permit fees, we have all kinds of stuff that gets outlaid before the event is even produced. For Burning Foot, before we even take the event, we have an outlay of about $175,000. So it costs a lot of money before we even open the gates to even get that out. And then we don't know if it's going to rain. So we take all the risk. After the fiscal year, we take that risk personally. So we want to ensure that there's a little bit of a buffer so we can keep the level of production that needs to be there. So that we're asking for a one-time transition gift to help ensure that we don't lose momentum anywhere. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I guess, would be to the commission or the city manager. Can I ask that, or should we wait?
Let's just follow up, finish questions for the presenter, and we'll get
Okay.
back to that.
All right. The other question I had, I'm kind of wondering. So, how exactly did you come about to wanting to take this event back over?
Well, it came to me first in a couple of different fashions that there was the want for transition for the city to not be so much in the event business anymore, and wanting to help take resources back to departments and energies that the city really needs to focus on. But not having a great transition plan, I offered, along with Brent and Lisa, to kind of put a plan together to say, hey, if you want to transition out of that, how could we help ensure that that happens, and do it by taking everything into account as well. And that's where this plan kind of came from. So we approached Kyle and Jonathan first, and we were walking through questions that they had. We want to make sure we heard everything that the city wanted to make sure was taking place. So we did that, and we put that down in a proposal, and then we submitted that back, and we kind of talked through it first. And after everyone said, yes, this looks good and sound, then it became something we presented today.
Okay, because I know we've got record-breaking attendance to the Taste of Muskegon this past year, which is just amazing. I think that the city employees who've been working on this have worked really hard on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to diminish their work at all
Not
here.
at all.
You had talked about the revenue for Taste of Muskegon specifically, because it sounds like the art festival about breaks even, maybe makes a little bit. What exactly are your plans to do with that revenue?
Well, one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to ensure that we have a good portion of that going back to nonprofits that are there. Some of that will stay within the nonprofit that we are establishing as well. So, and then the third thing we want to do is work with the community foundation to set up a legacy fund so we can end up having community grants that we're able to give back over time. So we're really taking the revenue that's there and dispersing that 3 different ways. Mm-hmm. Now, again, if it's a rainy day, we may not have any revenue. It is a risk that we take, and that is a very common thing. If you have a bad weekend, that can have a huge impact on the profitability of any single event. If you look at Taste revenue, which is the one that actually makes the most money, between Friday and Saturday, it's about 50-50 split. Now, we have well over half of the total revenue going in goes back out to costs. So if we lose half of that revenue to a rainy day, that event is severely at risk of losing money that year. Now, Taste or Lakeshore Art Festival only breaks even. So we're taking on the risk for an event that also could lose money. So that's why we want to try to take both of them on, because if one has a bad year and the other one doesn't, that other one can hopefully subsidize the losses. It's a big risk. Event management is very, very difficult.
It is.
Yeah,
It
it's very
definitely
difficult.
is. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochin. Commissioner Kilgo.
Thank you. Speaking on that topic you just touched on, if you all were to take over these two events, is your plan to keep them going consistently, even if you run into some bad years that whether the weather or turnout is low?
Yeah, definitely. The sense of making sure that these two events stays running in the city is priority number one. These two events mean too much to the city. They have to stay around. So we need that gift to really act as a buffer and a retainer for a rainy day fund. It's a backup for us so that personally, I don't put either one of my two partners at risk for that. We are willing to take this on by ourselves. We don't want to, but we're willing to. We need the city's gift to help ensure that we're not overexposed personally for that. So it's a big risk. We're willing to take it on. I have no doubt in how we're going to be able to produce this festival. We're going to not rock the boat. We're going to make sure it's sound and it stays profitable for years. And as we gain enough of a buffer, we will be able to do micro grants back through the legacy fund. We're going to have distribution after after everything's paid, the books are closed, then we'll be able to do profit back out to all the other nonprofits. We have everything set in place to do that. Lisa's going to be running finance for us as well, which she does day to day already. And we'll make sure that these events stay around for a long time.
Awesome. And my second question is, are you all open to getting other or more diverse nonprofits as far as helping, volunteering, funding them,
Oh, yeah.
stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. United Way, the only reason that they came up right now is that there was just a conversation there as they were actually bidding for just Taste of Muskegon as well. But that's a lot of burden for them to be able to have to produce that and have that liability on their books also. So we worked out an agreement where if they'll help us with volunteering, we'll have some form of, after the books are closed for the year, have some form of a donation that goes back to them. But again, in that many, not one approach ensures that we can take more nonprofits into that fold. And we may find there's value added stuff that comes with it, whether it's the kids area or another area that we haven't even focused on yet that comes into play. There could even be a nonprofit row where we're giving nonprofits more exposure, which I look at a lot of festivals we have, and I don't think enough nonprofits get enough exposure just to get the word out. If we have 20,000 Muskegon residents coming through, I mean, what kind of great exposure is that to sign up, get engaged, volunteer, just be there and be present? I mean, there's a lot of ways we can go. It's just having those conversations and figuring out how to make two iconic events in Muskegon more sound and more beneficial to the city we live in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgo. Any other questions at this time? Commissioner German.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Sure. And I'm just looking at the information, and this is a 2-day event, right? And you say you taking a risk. I'm taking on these two projects, and a couple of questions that I had was asked. And one thing that I've always stressed when we have any type of activities or events, a sense of belonging, to make sure that everyone is welcome. And you talked about, working with different nonprofit organizations. And now, is this your first event that you'll be doing with a taste or
No.
art festival?
No, for Taste of Muskegon, Brent and I were the original founders of the festival. So
okay.
the creation of that event was ours.
Okay, it did. You did
And-
say that. It did say that.
Yeah, and we transitioned that to downtown Muskegon now, and then that transitioned to the city. So for Taste, it's really coming back home.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now, just for like startup organizations, someone wants to get in, and the fee, is it affordable for vendors to partake in this? And
Yeah, so the vendor structure, I think Lisa could talk about that better than I could.
I can talk about it as far as Taste Muskegon is concerned. We have had a increasing security deposit for the taste vendors over the past few years, which I was not a fan of. I always wanted to keep that low because I know it's a barrier, especially for food vendors that don't have high margins to put out a couple $100s leading into it. And this year, I believe it was your staff that actually came up with the idea to turn it around. Instead of having a security deposit to get in, you just don't, as part of the agreement that you will have a fine if your space is destroyed when you leave, so that there wasn't an actual cost to get into it. It's just
so that's
fine
been
if you-
waived pretty much.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And there's a lot of things you had said. Everybody feeling welcome, and that has been an initiative for Taste for many years to make everybody feel welcome and invited and included. And we've really pushed the diversity of food vendors we've had. I've always had when I started as the volunteer coordinator, and now I'm the marketing director. And when I started, we already had a very diverse volunteer population, but I think the attendance population of Taste and most certainly the food vendor population has gotten more and more diverse as time goes by. And that's been something that's very important to us. And then we've already discussed as a team how we can also bring some of those different ideas to Lakeshore Art Festival, because I think there's a lot, art is part of every community, and I don't think we necessarily see every community as part of the art festival. So I think there's a lot of room for growth and excitement there
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, thank you. That was going to be my next question about the art. The expression of art, what it symbolizes, the diversity, the different cultures. It's important. Education also. Educating the public. So yeah, but I like the fact that fee was waived. That's going to help out a lot of vendors.
Yeah, me too. I think we saw just a few different people able to join this year because of that. Who have been a part of it in the past even said that was helpful for them, that they can put more into having enough food to feed everybody the whole time instead of just paying this upfront in the street if they mess it up.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner German. Commissioner Gorman?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for coming. I am a little bit all over the place on this one because most of you know I am emotionally tied to both of these events, having been part of them. So I guess my first question for staff is, do we have kind of like a tangible... Yeah.
Let's reserve questions right now for the presenters, and then we'll go to staff, because then they can sit down. So rather than
I have
just
no
standing
questions
while
for
we
you guys.
question-
I have no questions for you.
no any other questions for the presenters at this time? Commissioner
that's
Cochin.
Commissioner German brought up a really good point about fee structure, and I was kind of wondering, are you guys anticipating, when you take over in 2025, a increase in fees for the citizens to come and attend?
No, right now those events are free, so they'll maintain that they're
Okay.
free. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochin. Last call for questions for the presenters? All right. Thank you. Appreciate you joining this evening and presenting. You're certainly welcome to stay as we continue our conversation. But I do want to thank each of you individually for your years of commitment to these events. And I really appreciate the work and the care that you put into these events.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Gorman.
Okay, thank you. I would like to know, I know in our packet, we have listed the event planners for as the city's been running these events. The event planners spend over 50% of their working hours planning these events. Do we have a tangible outlook at, if we do transition these events away from the city's management, what our residents can expect from the Parks and Rec Department in terms of services that gain because we will no longer be managing these events?
Yes, absolutely. That's basically the whole point of this entire transition. We'd like to run some youth sports. We'd like to have some camps in the summer, in the school year, day off camps, things like that. Programs. There's also a big need, and it's not really thought of. It's always thought of being handled under parks, but recreation oversight in the parks is also a big part of this. That's a lot of the work that I put on our recreation coordinators is we have a lot of leagues that use our parks. We have a lot of issues that are not just maintenance issues. They're, figure out why the bike path is like this, help us with an amenity over here, providing recreation, as well as working with community partners. I can't tell you how many community partners that I don't want to say I don't have the time for, but we will have more time for them when we're done with these programs. That's a huge part of when Parks and Recreation was brought here, that we'd be able to kind of lift up our community partners, provide more opportunities for them. And the coordinating, the meeting, the phone calls, the emails that I have with community partners takes up a ton of time, and that's one thing that I would be putting on them as well. But yeah, I mean, daddy-daughter, mommy-child dances, breakfast with Santa, like a lot of holiday events and things like that, and then some programs, classes, enrichment classes. Some of those through us, some of those through partners. The senior program is pretty much it's running pretty light right now, but we'd like that to be amped up a little bit. So yeah, across the board, everything we're doing and we could add is there's definitely a lot of things. And actually, a good point to put that up tomorrow. The fee schedule is on the agenda for some Parks and Recreation programs, and so of course that's a small dive into what we'd like to do and the fee schedule for those programs. So absolutely, it's something we really wanted to do, and we've kind of held back from doing so. I throw a lot on the recreation coordinators, and they certainly let me know when it's when it just isn't feasible to be running these programs and then running an event. And also, if you never run programs before, it's a lot of work. So a lot of people just say, show up and run a soccer program. But a lot goes into that, especially when you're talking about, May, June. That's all you're planning for summer. That's when summer starts. That's when, like, the bulk of rec programs are. And our June is wiped out. And that could be, working with a lot of programs for the youth of the community.
Thank you, Director Karczewski. Just a second for your follow-up, Commissioner Gorman. You had something to add, Mr. Manager?
Yeah, just to add to Director Karczewski's answer. So as we expanded the recreation offerings in the city and looking at our availability to add staff and how we make those shifts, because these function in the general fund, we didn't really have the capacity to start adding the recreation staff that we would need to do the type of programming that we wanted. And so that's where this shift happened, and we started looking at what our options were to do that. So by making this shift away from doing these two events in-house at the city, it frees up that time without having to add additional staff that we would have a hard time balancing with, within the general fund budget.
Do we have a tangible though? Like, if if our team's getting half their week back, like, we set a goal of 5 new leagues or whatever, or activation in this many parks, and that looks like this. That's, I guess, have we gotten that far as a team to know, like, this is what we're getting back?
Well, we haven't. Until this is approved, we don't have that. With the fee structure, there is a lot of programs and activities in that. Really, the amount of things we want to do, grows with every day that I get reached out with by someone. I don't really want to put a cap on what we can do, because there's a lot. Last week met with a gentleman who has a group that does art and a lot of enrichment classes in cooking, home ec for adults. So every there's so much, but of course I don't have the capacity to run that under me. So I can bring some more information tomorrow when we talk about the fee schedule. But I'd say that does outline it. That has holiday events, specialty summer camps, fitness classes, and really it touches on home ec, youth, seniors would be, I'd say, kind of the key there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Gorman. Questions for staff? Commissioner German.
Yeah, I think, Mayor. Thank you, Director. I'm just kind of curious, because I hear you saying, that taking on these 2 projects, with staff, basically, not having the capacity, more or less. even with the Lakeshore Art Festival, was there any consideration of handing it back over to the chambers and let them handle it?
I got a pretty solid not interested
Okay, okay,
from the chamber.
okay.
That's how we got it.
Yeah,
We didn't wanna do it anymore.
I know. Back in 2013.
We
yeah.
took it on to keep it alive.
Yeah. So I just thought maybe they may want to look back at it. Okay.
Yeah. Nope,
Just
they-
thought I'd ask.
Yep, I did too.
Thank you, Commissioner German. Commissioner Kilgo.
Yeah, I just have one question. I see that the Taste of Muskegon's website is updated, has the 2024 dates and times and events, but the Lakeshore Art Festival's website is not updated. Do we have plans to update that soon? Because it's just over a month away.
Yeah, I will talk to the event director about that. She's probably watching right now, so probably be updated soon.
Commissioner Coach.
Yes. So I was kind of wondering, and this might be more towards maybe the city manager than you, Jonathan, or than you, Kyle, but the money from the events that we are currently making, where does that go right now?
So Parks and Recreation has not received the revenue from the event because we haven't run it yet. This is our first year running it, so we've yet to actually reap the benefits of it. It for the farmers market was who was reaping the rewards of these events.
Okay.
So we currently do not don't. I mean, really, right now, what the thought is with the $50,000 request, that would pretty much cover a lot of our revenues from this year, and that would probably be used to. I will actually speak at the DDA tomorrow with them about if they would approve us using those funds for the transition.
Mr. Manager.
So that was going to be, what I was going to say is that this sits in the DDA. So it sits outside of the general fund budget and within the DDA budget as far as the revenue and expenses and risk for the event sits with the DDA. And that transition, was that made right away, Ann, or was that after year 2 with us?
Immediately upon coming.
Immediate. Okay. Thanks, Dave. So and that is as the proposal was pointing out, because of the risk associated with the event, we didn't want the general fund to bear that risk.
Right.
And so the DDA graciously took that on, and then they held the revenue, and then for the most part, the revenue was used to purchase items or support the farmers market. So.
Right. So what I'm thinking, and this is kind of to the commission as a whole, is that we're being asked for $50,000 to pay one time for a purchase of the 2 events. The Taste of Muskegon typically makes about $50,000. So, but that money would before go to the farmers market. So the farmers market was depending on that money. Do we have a plan for recouping that?
So the money wasn't used for operations. It was used for one-time expenses that would come up, and the farmers market would come to the DDA to ask for permission to use those for that funds for capital improvement. So it's not. So it wasn't used for operational purposes. So there won't necessarily be
A hole to fill.
yes, a hole to fill.
Well, that's fair, but I would assume they've done it more than once, and when you start doing that, you kind of start depending on that, and I kind of want to know what our plan is for going forward. Do we have a game plan there?
Well, the money would have went to Parks and Recreation had this been a long-term agreement.
Yeah, so we'd already made the decision to transition away
transition.
from the farmers
Okay.
market. Yeah. Yeah.
And the farmers market, we do events as well still on site for the farmers market, such
Right.
as the food truck rallies. This next one is coming up.
Like
We
2
got
weeks.
food truck rallies as well as dinner in the dark and some other special events that happen at the market itself, which are used to raise funds for the market.
Right. I guess ultimately what I'm just trying to wrap my head around is as a city government, are we in the business of selling our events?
So, can I answer? I mean, you can jump in, but I got a perspective
Okay,
as well.
go for it.
So these are not city events. We did not start these. We took them on because the previous event organizers did not wish to continue them. And so rather than see them fall by the wayside, which have had a rich tradition in Muskegon's history, the city and our DDA specifically stepped up to take on organization to keep them alive. It has been, with regard to taste, there was also an added expectation that it could help defray the costs of needs at the farmers market. But it was not exactly ever the desire of the city or organization to put on these events. And they have proven to be, while our staff has done phenomenal work with them, it has proven to be quite taxing on our staff, and taking away from other services and programming that could be provided to our residents. And as noted, even when you talk about the net revenues or net profits from the events, that's not taking into account our staff's time at the same time.
Also true.
So our staff has a considerable amount of time and, by extension, cost to our general fund that is going into these events. So here's an opportunity for someone else to step up. Folks that have been intimately involved with the events over the years, including founding the event, insofar as Taste of Muskegon is concerned. People who I see as being respectful, trusted members of our community and capable of taking these on and keeping them alive and shouldering that risk and those costs and taking that risk off our plate and allowing us to redirect our limited staff capacity in different ways to serve our city. So, you have anything to add?
No, that's pretty much what I was going to
Okay.
say.
Thank you.
Commissioner Vice Mayor St. Clair.
Thank you. So if my math is correct, the city has been responsible for Taste of Muskegon for 6 years now. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. 2018.
Out
I
of
think.
18 years.
Yeah.
So fairly recent. And the art festival, it looks like 3 years since 1961. So our involvement in this is really quite recent so far as the history of the events. My question to you, Director Krajewski, is you alluded to this when you said that with the event planners moving from the city clerk's office to the parks department, the revenue that was generated by these would have gone to your department. If we shift this, you will not get that revenue.
Correct.
Can you just state clearly that it sounds like you're saying that the time that you will have is more valuable than the dollars you would get. Is that a reasonable?
Yeah, that's reasonable. And we still want to run events, just the events that take less time and make good amount of money. We also have, a park board who's trying to help us find long-term funding too. So I guess, at the end of the day, we're prioritizing running community programs over a couple events. I've ran a lot of events that make good amount of money that take, 5% of the time. So that would be the thought is to, to have events that are less demanding but still make some good revenue. And then, running programs that create some revenue too.
And those events would be more community or neighborhood level, directed towards our immediate community and residents. These are massive events that are more
They
regional
pull
and
from
even farther
yes,
than regional.
the state.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mr. Manager, you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add some context from my time as being the downtown director, and having run Taste of Muskegon for a number of years. We've talked about using the revenue sources for donating to specific organizations or supporting the farmers market. When Muskegon Main Street, which was the predecessor to Downtown Muskegon now, took over the event, one of the 3 pillars of the funding model for Main Street was revenue through volunteer events, and that revenue going to support the downtown office for investments. And as I left, and then as Dave Alexander came in and took over that role at Downtown Muskegon, now that was still one of the pillars. And then as Taste came into being under the city, one of the reasons, other than the fact that it was underneath Ann, was looking at supporting the farmers market so that mission of having a volunteer or having a contribution to the community component would continue, as that was a key part of Taste, which is something that the Event Lab group is looking to continue having that give back. So that the Taste wasn't created to support a specific nonprofit or entity. It was it evolved into that over time, and it was continued as it came onto city staff's responsibility.
Follow up, Vice Mayor St. Clair?
Just a thought that, as Mr. Serio referenced, that these events are very weather dependent on how successful they are and how much money that we make with them. And there's a solid chance if we are unfortunate enough to have 2 rainy days on 2 specific weekends, we would make $0 at all on this. And in fact, end up with a net loss. So I think that that has to be factored in as well. It's not guaranteed that there's ever going to be any revenue from these from year to year or how much it will be.
And then what's that look like for
Right.
recreation that following year?
Does that make sense for us to be funding 2 staff people, basically 1 full-time position, all year round for an event that may or may not provide anything back to the program that is carrying the freight for it?
Any other questions for staff at this time? With regard to the request for $25,000 each, what do we have in reserves right now? Well, I shouldn't. What, if whomever can provide some historical context, what do we typically have in reserve at the end of the event that we keep in reserve to help fund planning costs for the next year? Does anybody have some historical? Yes, Mr. Alexander, could you come up, please, and introduce yourself?
Dave Alexander, a community engagement specialist. Prior to this, I was overseeing staff-wise the DDA, and I was at downtown Muskegon now as we brought this over in mid-2019 to the city. I believe we have built, okay, this has gone over time because we've been successful. We have not had a rain event that has knocked us down. Why did we go to the DDA? The DDA took a risk to keep us going so that we could build up rain insurance. It's about $130,000.
Okay.
But over the course of time, because of the success that the clerk's office had in building that up, they have taken funds out. The most recent was around $50,000, I think.
We still haven't taken everything
Yeah.
that we've been authorized to. We're still working on it.
So that those funds are there, and they've been there as rain insurance. It's never, the event budget has never gone into the DDA funds that are captured under TIFA. That's been completely
events have been-
separate, and we've been successful, lucky, that we've never had to dip in, and it's been a building, growing fund up to this point.
Yeah. Staff has done very well in keeping those events alive and self-supporting. So it sounds like we have approximately $130,000 in reserve right now. Obviously, the events are forthcoming. That can change. But let's say all things being equal, or let's say there's continuity.
And some of that is authorized, again,
Yeah,
for
it's
the farmer's
about-
market
How
already.
much? Do you have a dollar amount off the top of your head approximately?
Yeah, about 80,000 or so.
But,
Yeah.
okay, well,
I've
then the
spent
balance.
some. Yeah, I've spent some of it, but not all of it.
Okay,
Yes.
well, then that already answers my next question. Then it's like, what are we going to do with the balance? So, but it sounds like the balance is already
I'm working
accounted
on
for.
it.
So we got to make sure that we end up with at least $130,000 still when the events are over in June, so that if the commission decides to move this forward, $50,000 could go towards the new event organizers, and the balance, $80,000, can go to our farmers market for what has been already authorized there. So the request that's on our agenda tomorrow for consent is to authorize staff to move forward with this transition. Will there be a formal agreement recognizing the transition that's going to be forthcoming subsequently that will come to the commission for approval?
Yeah, I doubt it's the last time that the commission's going to hear about this. That it should have been worded differently. We should have worded it as, authorize us to engage in, creating some kind of transition plan, or creating, an agreement. And so
Okay.
that's,
So essentially we're asking us to give you your blessing to proceed with finalizing an agreement to be brought forward to a draft to be brought forward to the commission for final review and adoption.
correct.
Okay.
Okay.
with that in mind, just wanted to share that I think it's important that we have some kind of language in the agreement. Maybe you already have it in your head or in a draft, that allows the events to return to the city of Muskegon, some kind of first right of refusal or protection. That if the lab events is not going to continue these or wishes to hand them off to someone else, that we have an opportunity to return them to DDA. And then assurances if there's some kind of deterioration in quality of the event, which I do not expect. I expect that quality to remain the same, if not be improved with caliber of people involved. That in the event that the quality were to deteriorate substantially with the event, that the city could somehow intervene in that regard.
Yeah, I think it was asked earlier by maybe Commissioner Cochin, but that's exactly what we were thinking, was to have something in there about if 3 years from now they did want to get rid of it, we'd have a clause in there for that.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts at this time, commissioners? No? All right. Thanks so much, Director Karczewski.
Thank you.
And thank you, Alan, Lisa, Brent. Appreciate you joining us this evening and your interest in taking this awesome responsibility on in stewardship of two phenomenal events. All right, next item, City Hall operations, space needs analysis. Is that Jamie Pesh in the planning department? Welcome, sir. If you'd kindly introduce yourself.
I am Jamie Pesh. I'm Planner 3 with our planning department here.
Welcome.
Give me a second to get this set up. Same thing.
It's not working on the screens up there again. Is it in the packet, Jamie?
Yeah, it should be.
Now it's not working.
I'm out.
Thanks.
I'll just hover around you, Jay.
Yeah, that's really difficult to look at. Streaming it. Yeah. My screen is different than what it shows up there. So,
I see Civic Clerk
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in
on our
it.
screen.
It looks like it's up and running.
It's not.
It's the back end of.
Yeah, this is not
Could
what's on my screen.
you-
Let me see.
I was wondering if you in here could pull up the attachment.
That's what I have up.
Oh, it's.
It's on my screen. Yeah,
Yes.
it's.
Oh, the attachment is showing up on your screen.
on my
Oh.
screen.
But the attachment is showing up on our screens.
Is your.
Key person here for these nights.
Is your.
Oh, wait.
Is it? Look at. What do you have?
Checking to see if you had a double screen going.
Are you? Because I just did it. Sorry, everyone. No, it's not yours.
There we go.
Okay.
Hey, there we go. Good job.
Zoom out. Like that?
There you go.
Okay.
much on this cover page, but there is.
Okay.
So,
There you go.
all right. So we worked with Integrated Architecture on a space needs analysis for the existing City Hall building here that we're in now and the Hackley Square building, which you can see in the photo there. Everybody recognizes that. With the intent of potentially considering a move of City Hall staff services to the Hackley Administration Building. We completed this over the last few months, beginning with just a walkthrough of this space, collection of existing documents and floor plans, and then shipping those off to Integrated and the team there to come up with a few just baseline metrics for what we have. If you want to go to the next page. Together some potential floor plans. Well, these are actually the existing floor plans, and compared the gross square footage. What we found that you can see in red there, very small on the right side, is that there's about a 9,000 gross square foot deficit between the Hackley Square building and the building that we're in today. But we continued on with the acknowledgement that there is far less space at that site. If you want to go to the next page. This is just a breakdown of how much square footage that each department uses, a breakdown of the use within the building and where it's located. So all very good information to have, but knowing, one more page. The as-is existing conditions, which come into play later, but as you can see here, a delta of 9,056 square feet between the two buildings. So we continued on knowing that was the case and also acknowledging that in our interviews with every department in this building, the police department was probably the least defined in terms of what the need was. We know that the space that they have in this building currently is undersized, but we also know that if they were to move with City Hall staff to the admin building, the former admin building, Hackley Square, that we may run into space issues for that department specifically. So we did a further test fit of all of the departments here, minus the police department in the new space, if you want to go one more page in. Some of the layouts that we come up with, we had them do what we called a test fit. We found that in most cases, what we were running into was some accessibility issues with the building. It is from the 1890s. It was built as a school. And what we end up with is a lot of structural walls that cause departments that are currently contiguous in this building all in one space to be sort of subdivided up. If you go one more page in. So you'll see, like, the treasurer, for instance, is broken up between two individual spaces in that building because the walls between them are load-bearing and can't be changed. There was no way for us to merge those spaces. Aside from that, we also found the same situation on most floors. You can see development services there is theoretically shown as one space that sort of spills out into a lobby that's found on each floor, but inspections is broken up between 2 or 3 spaces in this instance, as is the city manager and community engagement departments, simply because you have restrooms stacked one on top of the other. All the floor plates are very similar until you hit the 3rd floor, and you would end up having to break up departments in a way that we don't think is completely conducive to the way that the operations of this building work. It would be a pretty big transition away from how departments are familiar with operating here. The architects broke down adjacencies and critical and desirable adjacencies between departments. So, for instance, the planning department prefers to be adjacent to the building inspections department. There's a lot of working that happens between those two, a lot of communication that happens, and what we found is that in most cases we could get them maybe on the same floor, but not 100% adjacent, and we were often stuck breaking up departments, as I had explained. There is, for anybody that may have been in this building, on the 3rd floor, a large auditorium space that would make a fantastic city commission chambers, but is also on the 3rd floor of the building. This building originally was built, that we're in right now, not the one that we're talking about. The one that we're in right now was built with the commission chambers on the 2nd floor, and in the 1990s we moved it to the first floor for accessibility needs. In this case, we would end up with commission chambers that is
very well equipped to serve that purpose, but some would argue on the wrong floor, and I think I would agree with that. There would be a lot of traversing different levels. We ran into issues with the elevator. As you can see, it's noted here. That area in the red outline is a targeted area for barrier-free access. The current elevator cab there is very, very small and wouldn't meet today's requirements. And for anybody that's been outside the building, you know, if you look in any door from grade around the building, you either are going upstairs or downstairs immediately when you walk inside. So again, that dashed red area is consistent through all of these drawings as a place for an internal staircase, and that would have to be something that's engineered in advance of a move just to provide the accessibility needs of modern day buildings. The Hackley Square building is also in a local historic district. It's in the National Register Historic District. So any changes to the exterior that might be necessary for accommodating a staircase like that would be something that the Historic District Commission would review, and obviously would not want to see too many drastic changes to the outside of the building. The architects think that it could be handled internally, but that is always a concern with the historic district component of it for future expansion of City Hall. If we were to gain more staff than what we could fit into this building, with the space gained back from maybe a police department being located in a separate building nearby, we could very quickly fill up if the city staff were to grow. Building site in the middle of the block, that seems like a strong suit until you factor in the historic district side of it, where building out into those lawns is not a desirable thing for the historic integrity of that building, and it would be very difficult to build something that could be as iconic as that building is standing alone as it was today. This is sort of a summary of the approach that we took. As I said, we did interviews with departments in existing City Hall, and we did get a lot of good information from that. So while it appears that the move to Hackley Square is not a great fit, we have a lot of information to work with here. This is the first, at least as my understanding goes, the first overarching review of the way space is used in our current City Hall building. There are some efficiencies that I think that we've identified, and we've talked a little bit about the police department. If you want to go one more page, there's a lot of text on the next page, but these are the findings that we came up with. So a lot of what I've explained so far, but it's really this last bullet point here, and I'll read it just verbatim. The police department does not appear to be a good fit for the Hackley Square building. It's the largest program element with minimal critical adjacencies to other departments, like I had discussed. And the police department could and perhaps should be in an independent space designed to support the critical services offered. The current police department is undersized, fragmented, and lacking the ability to grow, and the Hackley Square building would not address these issues and would create similar constraints for that department. So that is one of the things that definitely came into play here. We have talked internally about the potential for this building going into the future. We are also located in the center of the block, but we're not in a historic district, and we're in a building that could potentially lend itself to building additions a little bit more appropriately than what the Hackley Square building could do. If we found ourselves in a situation where additional space was needed and there was an opportunity for the police department building, that could be an opportunity in this area. And majority of what I think we'd have to share about this. A very enticing thought, I think, and a very iconic building in the city of Muskegon, one that we all agree, including the architects, would make a great city hall. It looks like a city hall building would, but just too many constraints spatially in terms of the way that building is laid out currently, and some of the difficulties that come with equipping that for modern day living, modern day doing business, and just public accessibility overall.
Well, thank you for your work on this and presenting this. I think this was a worthwhile endeavor to assess the possibility of turning the Hackley Admin Building into City Hall and repurposing this facility. Doesn't sound like it's feasible or most prudent given the various different constraints that you've shared with us. the commissioners, do you have questions about the analysis and where we're going from here? Commissioner Kilgo.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Jamie. Our police department definitely needs more space than they currently have. I mean, we're literally renovating this building to give them space upstairs because they don't have enough space. And I'm not saying that the Hackley Square building is perfect. Your analysis says it's not right for them. But I guess my question is, it's a two-part question. One is because they would have the whole building, as opposed to this current building that we're in, they do not have the whole building. We have city staff. And then my second question is, if this building is not right, is the police department themselves looking for possible other space, or are we not looking at all for a different space for the police department? Or is there a department that actually is keeping their eye out for a potential space so that our police department can have the space that they need and grow?
Yeah, so I think this came up as a result of this study. Before we had really dove into all of this, we didn't know. I mean, we knew just based on observation that the police department probably needed space, but we didn't realize quite what the deficit was in terms of that space. Like I said, we went into this with the idea of a potential move, saw that there was a 9,000 square foot deficit, kind of started looking back at this building and seeing some of the deficits that exist here. I think the argument could be made that yes, maybe there is potential for a new building for the police department or another department if it proves to be necessary. As things are right now, I think there are more efficient ways to use this space. Probably the most helpful information that came from what Integrated put together for us. There are inefficiencies in the way we have things laid out now that maybe we don't recognize because we live it every day. There's a lot of storage space inefficiency in particular, and just the locations of some departments in this building, I think, could be reconfigured in a way that would be more beneficial to multiple departments, not just the one being reconfigured.
So I'm going to piggyback up your question, and then I'm going to have the Mr. Manager jump in as well. So with regard to separate facilities for the police department, which we know is needed, the space that they have right now is not ideal for a police department. In some ways, woefully insufficient. And at the same time, our DPW, the yard, the DPW facility on Keating, DPWs could use some upgraded facilities and expanded facilities as well. So something that I have advocated for, and Mr. Mayor can chime in and see whether there's realistic prospects of moving that forward in any capacity, is having a co-located police department and DPW, centrally located. I've suggested the idea, although we'd have to have a willing seller, which is the vacant Brunswick property on Laketon Avenue, near Laketon and Seaway right there. That I see the benefits of that as because our police department, our vehicles go out to DPW for fueling and maintenance, and DPW is currently located in the far eastern edge of the city, but has to cover the whole city and spends a lot of time on the west side as well. So that's a lot of time and wear and tear, staff time and cost, wear and tear on vehicles, and could we do something that's more centrally located to realize cost efficiencies in that regard, but also improve service responses from DPW and or police department for the entirety of our city, being centrally located, co-sited as well. And so that's a vision. Of course, that takes a lot of effort and money to achieve, but I do see a lot of benefit and efficiencies as well in that regard. But I'm going to continue, suggesting, encouraging, advocating, see how we might be able to make that happen if it is possible at all.
For clarification, that's currently private property?
Yes. It's currently private. It's a vacant private property that formerly housed the Brunswick manufacturing facility.
So from a logistics standpoint, staff has certainly mused that would be a wonderful location to do a co-located DPW and PD. It's what's the word I want to look for? A long shot, I think might be a good way to say it. Just as far as being able to acquire the property, but it is something that we have explored a little bit in the past. One thing that I wanted to add to respond to Commissioner Kogo is regarding the space in this building. And I don't even know how many years ago it was now. The engineering department vacated upstairs and moved out to DPW, which created that open space upstairs, which has been unused for 4 years. Yeah. And the re-engineering that we're going through there right now to move the detective bureau upstairs to create additional space on the first floor where we can move the patrol division up to the main floor out of the basement starts to create some more efficiencies that we didn't have before, and also allows us to look at using the space in the basement as more of a flex space for training that could be used maybe possibly beyond just the police department. So the things that we're doing within this building now, it's our hope, well, we're doing things that bring value to the building, and it's our hope that will bring additional flexibility to the space for all the departments that are here. And, but to the mayor's point, we have, looked at different locations where we could co-locate, or realize different efficiencies. I just don't know that that's practical at this particular juncture. So.
Never hurts to ask.
No, it does not.
Those mouths don't get filled. Any follow-up, Commissioner Kogo?
No, thank you.
Any other questions at the time? Commissioner German.
Oh, yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Pash. Going back to the police department and need for larger space. Got a chance to take a tour a while back when Chief Kozel started, and there's definitely a need for larger space for that for the police department. And given the fact that due to the study here, that would not work for Muskegon Police Department. And then I think I seen something in here. Also, it wouldn't be. They wouldn't be able to have like a firing range or something like that, or.
Yeah, it was noted that there is a gun range currently with the police department, but moving that into the Ackley Square building would also be a very difficult thing to accommodate, just because of the amount of space that takes up.
Right. So that's another barrier right there. So yeah, it's good that city is exploring different options. And then having staff also possibly relocate. But yeah, I think having a nearly new fire department like we've had in the past, and it would be good to have a good, nice sized police department for staff and the police department to do the things that they need to also. How do we get there? How much is it going to cost? Hey, I guess that's the next question.
Thank you, Commissioner German. Any other questions or comments at this time with regard to the space needs analysis and the outlook that will be staying put?
I just want to say thank you so much, Jamie, for doing the work on this, because from the outside, it looked like the perfect solution. But obviously doing the work, it's shown us that is not the option that we want to take. So thank you so much for doing all that.
You're here. Thank you, Planner Pesh. Right. Appreciate you. Next up, Muskegon Social Equity Program. And this being reported out by our planning director. Well, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. We're in the habit of having each of you introduce yourselves every time you come up to the microphone. Please introduce yourself, sir.
I'm Mike Franzek. I'm the planning director.
Welcome. And you're reporting out on this item?
Yes. So every year I come here around this time of the year to discuss what we did with the MSCP last year and how we want to allocate those dollars for this year. So some highlights of how we spent the funding last year. We did not spend any of our grants and loans. These are grants and loan programs that are designated to help people that were negatively affected by marijuana, whether they have a charge or maybe their parents had a charge when they were growing up. We were pretty successful in spending this money down the past couple years. However, this year we just did not have enough interest. I am working with somebody right now on a food truck idea, and they do qualify, so that's pretty promising. I'm also expecting several applicants from Green Room Gardens to do some more training. That just hasn't come through yet. But my proposal moving forward would to not fund this grant and loan program for the next year, which I'll be getting into. But we have other ideas for another grant program, and we still have about $90,000 left in this fund to spend down. So I wouldn't want to put any more in that for right now. We did put 30% of our funding last year into $10,000 we gave to help out with the fair housing settlement in our CNS department. So those went to the neighborhood organizations, and they really appreciated that. We also have pinpointed 8 alleys that we're going to be paving. It looks like DPW will be able to do that in the fall. So we have those identified in the Angel, Marshfield, and Nelson neighborhoods, and those all have marijuana retailers. So we believe that's a really good project. We did the education and harm reduction with mediation and restorative services. They did the work with the schools and the anti-vaping. That's worked out very well. We had a little bit money left over from the previous year on that. And we also held 4 expungement clinics, which we didn't fund this past year, but we had left over from the previous 2 years, and those went very good as well. We can see the stats that Guns provided for us. I attended all 3 events, and they were very successful, and there were a lot of people there. They were able to get a lot of people cleared. So moving forward for this year, I had suggested that we bump up from 30 to 35% the fair housing and the public infrastructure improvements. This would be to give another $10,000 to the CNS department for the neighborhood organizations, and to identify another set of alleys that we can get done. There are plenty of blocks within these neighborhoods that have unpaved alleys and a lot of people using them. So we believe that's a great benefit to these areas. Instead of funding our traditional grant and loan program, what we would like to propose is giving 35% of that, about $68,000, towards a new business grant. And we haven't really fleshed this out yet, but we wanted to kind of discuss this with you all and get some buy-in from the commissioners before we came up with the project or the guidelines of the program. But we were thinking that it wouldn't have to be for people that necessarily were affected by marijuana in the past, but these could be businesses in these neighborhoods or within a mile of any of these retailers. So we could give business retention and attraction grants to certain economic development projects where we could really use the funding in helping attract businesses. We believe we should fund the education and harm reduction again, but it looks like we had about $9,000 left over from last year, and that was a 13-month program. They're proposing to extend it for 12 months this year, and they're only suggesting they need $40,000 to do that for another year. We're proposing to do 3 more expungement clinics. I've been in contact with Guns. They were the most successful group that we work with by far. They were able to do it way more affordable and more effectively than anyone else. They are asking for a bump up in the payments. We only paid $8,000 per expungement clinic. They're asking for $15,000, and this is to cover the cost of follow-up consultations, surveys, and to pay the staff that spent hours that pulled iChats, making folders, registering people, and making phone calls, and all the monitoring associated with the expungement clinics and the wraparound services. If you attended any of these, you could see that there were dozens of people pitching in effort, and it really only makes sense to pay for these services, and they'd still come in a lot cheaper than the other clinic that we were funded last year. So again, we are proposing not to fund that historical grants and loan program, but to come up with this new business grants program instead. And We received $649,949 from the excise tax. So 30% is what we have historically contributed would be $194,984 towards the MSEP.
Thank you, Mr. Franzik. Commissioners, questions right now? Commissioner German.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Franzik. Okay, a couple things. When I brought this to the commission didn't know anything about social equity. And given the fact that there was some pushback on this, now that we have this in place and an opportunity to help families, individuals who were impacted by the prohibition of marijuana. I think this is the opportunity that these people deserve, because how it impacted families, displaced families and fathers out of the homes due to the lack of opportunities. A lot of them selling drugs, selling marijuana, which at that time was a felony, and they did prison time, and it ripped up families. And now, to make things right, because we legalized marijuana, and when we opt in on recreation, a lot of the people that was benefiting off marijuana and the opportunity did not look like me, okay, hadn't had any records, and they're benefiting off of the opportunity that others did not have, now that it's legal. To take away the grant and loans program, Director Franzik, to me would be a disservice. I am not in favor of that. I know you talked about some other options, but also I'm a little leery because it may not give the edge and opportunity, fair opportunity, to the ones that were really impacted. I think because now that the opportunity will be out there for other grants, it may alleviate those that were really impacted. So that's my concern there. Also, we talked about the application process for social equity to change it and have it reflect the state's social equity application, and that has not been done yet. So that's something that I propose to have on the legislative.
Not sure what you mean by that.
Well, you know, when we talked about the on the social equity application, as we talked about before, where it aligns with the state application when it deals with misdemeanors and felonies, it does the same language. Is not on the city's application.
You're eligible whether you have a misdemeanor or a felony. We don't discriminate on that.
Yeah, and there was some concern about that, if that would be a barrier or an issue.
It's not.
Yeah, so, and that needs to be addressed also. So thanks for that clarification also.
But just to be clear, I'm not suggesting we get rid of the grants and loan program. I think it's a fantastic program, but we already have about $90,000 left over. So I'm just suggesting we don't fund it this year, see if we can spend down that $89,000, and then this time next year, if it's low, I would suggest we put more money into it. But I don't anticipate us being able to spend $90,000 in the next year.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even know about the opportunities, and how do we get the word out? Also, with the expungements, now I really like that, especially the portion where the clean slate, not only wiping out felonies, but the barriers due to evictions and homelessness. This could really help out there if citizens had that opportunity to have their record or that evictions wiped out. And I'm assuming this is what that clean slate and expungement would kind of help do to help citizens in those needs. So that's pretty much my take on it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner German. I do want to clarify, because you preface your comments with having brought forward the social equity program. And I do want to clarify, it was Commissioner Warren who had brought forward the social equity program and insisted on us having a social equity program before we adopted recreational marijuana in the city of Muskegon. So it was her insistence, and I want to give her credit for being so adamant and passionate about that. Our city manager at the time, Frank Peterson, did draft a pretty involved social equity program that went far beyond the scope of what we have here, and then the commission decided to dial it back to be more simplified and straightforward and probably more accessible at the same time in that regard. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Excuse me, Mayor, let me correct you on that, because I'm not saying that Commissioner Warren did not voice that, but there were meetings with Manager Peterson and Director Franzik and staff before that. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. No, I'm just saying.
I'm not going to argue with you.
No, I'm not going to argue with you either, because I know. No,
moving on to
you
Vice
gave me
Mayor
the floor.
St.
You gave me the floor. I have the option to speak. Allow me to speak. Okay? When you say something and it's not true, I'm going to state the facts.
Own it.
Okay.
You have not held yourself accountable.
That's all I'm saying. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner German. It was Commissioner Warren who brought that forward. And yourself voted no on the recreational marijuana on each time of those. That created the revenue to fund social equity programs.
I'm not talking about
Vice
recreational.
Mayor St. Clair,
I'm talking about social equity.
which was part and parcel with the recreational marijuana program. Vice Mayor St. Clair.
Thank you. You spoke of the groups who did the expungement clinics last year. And can you remind us, was Guns the local group?
Guns was a local group,
Okay.
yes. Yep.
So they had a more affordable, more effective program, and it was a local community grassroots
Yes,
situation.
and I can't imagine if we did another RFP, we'd find somebody even better than this. They've been just really great to work with and helped a lot of people.
I love to hear that. And then I'm wondering, you spoke about your idea of a business grants program, and I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to what you're thinking of with
Sure.
that.
Well, again, we don't have it totally fleshed out.
Sure.
And I'm sure
But I bet you have an idea.
Sure, and our development services director may
Okay.
as well. But we just don't have a lot of money for actual business development grants. So I think we would probably put our heads together and see, with our economic development analysts, what's out there and what's needed for some of these expansion projects. So, did I see Jake somewhere behind me? Oh. So I think that's what we're thinking.
Okay.
So
I'll let Jake
I'm going to
speak
piggyback
on
on
that.
that. With regard to the
He's got good
expungements, could you speak to, so we had Great Lakes Expungement Network put on a fair in concert with Timber, as well as several other local cannabis operations. And I did get a chance to attend that, and it looked like there was quite a bit of participation. It seemed to be very well organized, a lot of turnout, and not only turnout, but they stayed beyond the hours, and they gave their contact information for follow-up to help them outside of that particular clinic. So it looked to be a very professional run organization, good turnout, and good follow-up engagement as well. So I'm just wondering why we wouldn't re-engage them on doing another clinic here locally.
Sure. I believe we spent $24,000 on that one, and that was just for the one event. So with the $8,000 we spent per clinic, with the three, we got three of them for the same price.
What did it come down per unit, like per person help? Because those costs were meant to defray, our expenses were meant to defray the costs of, fingerprinting, iChat, background check, postage, so on and so forth. So, do we have a breakdown on a per unit basis?
I don't
What
have
the
that.
costs
no.
were? Okay. All right. I just want to not disavow or at this point I would say I would not want to disregard the prospect of working with the Great Lakes Expungement Network in the future again in some capacity, because it did really great work.
Sure.
Yeah. Vice Mayor St. Clair, did you have a follow-up? I'm sorry. I jumped in there
Sure.
and piggybacked.
I'm just wondering if there's any further information about the business grants opportunity.
Oh, yes.
Since
Jake.
Jay came all the way up and didn't
Yeah, Jake
actually get to
handled this
speak.
one.
Good evening. Thank you for that question. So, as Mike said, this is in concept phase, but we've had the single biggest request we get from the small business community that our development analysts, myself, the planning team, the CNS team, is what sort of resources out there that are direct funding for small business operations. We have a very entrepreneurial community. There's not a lot of opportunity out there from the state statute level or really much foundation or nonprofit opportunity for direct funding at this point when it comes to small business development and operations. That's something that has really fallen by the wayside in the last couple decades when it comes to economic development. So the goal would be to put together a program where we would, within 1 mile of any licensed marijuana facility of any kind in the city of Muskegon, whether that's production or grow, basically anything within 1 mile, we would open up application windows annually as we got our excise tax dollars, and we would give out grants for various types of development that did not support staff operations. So, which is very typical for any sort of small business grant. So anything that would be related to facilities and facade, anything that would be related to business expansion efforts, any sort of new market that people are trying to enter, whether that's education or training, things of that nature for sole operators, small businesses that aren't qualified or unable to access larger programs that the state puts on. So we'd be trying to fill some resource gaps.
I like this idea. I would like to see us put our thumb on the scale for minority and women-owned businesses to receive that kind of assistance. But I think, just looking in my mind at the overlay district and how much blight there is in those areas, I think that this could be really helpful to incentivize something happening with some of those vacant properties that are just getting dilapidated.
That's good feedback. I think we can workshop that a little bit more. Some of the items that Director Franzak can expand on a little more. The alley paving was partially. A lot of those alleys are used as primary parking areas for those residents, and they're been historically not well maintained by the owners, adjacent owners, and there's a lot of blight and dumping. So through paving, we would obviously also clean up. Beyond that, I think the neighborhood beautification program that we contributed funding to has been very, very successful. Not only the fair housing dollars and the other dollars, but we actually just stopped taking applicants for that last week because it was very well utilized. So expanding those programs or finding specific problem areas is certainly something we can take a look at. And it's interesting that you mention women and minority-owned businesses, because there's actual relatively older policy language as it relates to the existing economic development loan fund that we have that puts those out as priority targets for that business-based loan. The challenge that I've run into historically with that loan when trying to market that to businesses that come in and ask for support is that it's also written and designed to be a lender of last resort, and the policy is prime interest plus 2%. And so with base interest being 6.5%, you're talking about an 8.5% interest 10-year loan, which is fairly costly. And so it can be prohibitive for folks. And so this grant is meant to help folks that are truly in a foundational stage or a true small business stage where they're still kind of setting up and maturing their business and helping to accelerate that.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner or Vice Mayor St. Clair. Commissioner Cochin.
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify because I think there's been a lot going on. The program that we are talking about, we're just talking about not funding this year because we have an excessive amount of funds, and we're going to not throw it away, right? We're going to keep it. And we're talking about bringing on a loan program, not a grant program. Is that correct?
No, ma'am. It would be a grant program that would be new. Yep. So we have an existing social equity grant program that is focused specifically on folks that have been directly impacted by either marijuana charges in the past or any sort of impacts from pre-legal Michigan marijuana laws. And so what we're proposing is to keep those programs, but also to expand, because we have never been able to really consistently expend all of our funding in those narrow scopes that we have it in now, is to expand the scope where we also fund new programming, which would be small business grants adjacent geographically to marijuana facilities in Muskegon, that would not be specific only to folks that have been impacted by marijuana legislation. So it would broaden who would be eligible for this new programming, but they would be small business grants.
Okay. Yeah, I think that Commissioner German and Vice Mayor Sinclair and I and all kind of agree that we want to make sure that these funds are going to the people who need it the most, the people who have been disadvantaged due to, the marijuana laws, because there was a lack of equity there. And that's not okay. And I think that the city agrees that that is not okay.
Yes, we would absolutely agree with that from a staff perspective. And from an analysis perspective, that's why we want to go within a geographic area of impacted corridors where there are those business investments, because they also couple with corridors that have higher than average proportions of people that were impacted by those laws, whether that's higher than average amount of people of color relative to the city's total population, or a younger population, which also are disproportionately impacted. So that's the goal, is to try to target these funds into corridors where we can make investments that will improve quality of life for the people impacted. Yep.
And just a follow-up question to that is, so how are we going to prevent the other marijuana businesses from taking advantage of that, if you know what I mean? Because they're all right there together. So are those grants going to be eligible to the marijuana businesses themselves?
No, the idea is to target it for non-marijuana industry businesses in the same corridors as the marijuana businesses.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Kilgo.
Thank you. For either director. First, I love this the small business boost, and I definitely would love to see us continue to dive into that deeper, see how we can help some small businesses within those areas. But with the grant and loan fund, basically still having that large amount of money in there, how are we getting people that information that there are grant/loan funds available?
So we have the information on our website. Our development analysts, who meet with dozens of businesses around the community, are aware of it, and they share that information. I share it almost on a weekly basis when people call, either looking for funding for businesses or it's a marijuana business, and I just like to get the word out that, hey, while you're thinking about getting your business started, we do have these grants and loans. So I like to think we get it out just as much as any other tax incentive we have or grant. The problem is, it's just hard to get it out to everybody. So there are people that probably don't know, but we're always willing for feedback if you know a better way.
Yeah, and I can get with you. I definitely have some ideas. The other thing is fair housing / public infrastructure improvements. I definitely love that we've been paving some of the alleyways. It definitely helps residents in those areas. But as far as that fair housing piece, is there any way, because I know funds are allocated for certain things, is there any way to look at it a little broader, fair housing / affordable housing / housing education, filter it down to educating people on other things that we're doing, like how we have one of the best infill housing projects in the state of Michigan, but getting people that home buyers education, or getting people educated on our city of Muskegon down payment assistance, or getting residents that already live and work here, or they might not work in the city limits, but getting people that already live here opportunities to get into some of the houses that we're building. I know I could say free pizza, and I still may have two people in the audience sometimes when you just say, hey, free homebuyers class. Not everybody shows up to those things. But I'm just thinking of a way to, if there's a way to take some of that fair housing dollars and help educate people in the community on how they can get into some homes.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We could allocate this anyway, and that doesn't really sound like too expensive of an endeavor. So we could say that $10,000 is to pay for some of these seminars or whatnot, and then use the remainder to go to the neighborhoods for the fair housing.
For sure. And I just say that because, like, I know right now there's an acronym for it, what Community Encompass was, and they're no longer around. And Chodo. Yeah, thank you. We don't have one. We have some entities that help a little bit here, Mid-Michigan and True North, and we have a few entities that help here and there, but we don't have an actual Chodo. So maybe taking some funds. I'm not saying that the city of Muskegon's going to be that entity. We need a new entity for sure, but a Band-Aid until we get someone that's going to take on that. I mean, we're too big of a city and we're growing. Our growth rate is, I believe, is too big for us to not have one. So I think that we should get one, but provide a few services, or even if, like you said, it's a seminar or something like that, where there's an incentive for people to come out, or something like we pair it with something else that we do.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Well, I think that goes hand in hand with fair housing, so I wouldn't see any issues with utilizing that money to put that on, and then using the remainder just to give to the CNS department for their programs.
Mike, can I just throw in there too that tomorrow we're going to be hearing from Consumers Credit Union, who wants to put an ATM at the farmers market. And one of the things that they have offered to do is to offer free programming about purchasing homes, and having classes at the farmers market regarding finances, but specifically about purchasing homes and anything that you can do. So.
And we could schedule one for 6 months after whatever they do, so we can hit more people.
That's all I have. The other questions I can just ask the manager or staff later. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgo. Any other questions or thoughts at this time? I'll go to Commissioner Gorman first, and then Commissioner German.
I just have, I hope it's a quick question. On page 58 of our packet in this, is the proposed 2024-2025 table, are those percentage allocations supposed to be up to 100? We're just off by 5,000 there if it is, that's all.
Oh yeah, that goes over 100%.
And then and then it says 2023 funding proposal highlights, but I think it's 2024.
Well,
Or no?
the funding was from when we received it.
Okay.
So it goes for the next year. So that, it is supposed to total. Are you saying the percentages don't?
The percentages go up to 103%, but that's why it's, so then if you add all them up, we're just over a little bit on that. So I just want to make sure the right programs aren't all of a sudden we find out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're a little off there.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I would propose taking some off of the business grants. That's kind of what we had for the remainder.
Okay. I found it. Cool. Thank you. That's all.
So, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to Commissioner German before I do my questions.
Okay.
Commissioner German, I'm sorry.
Just
Go ahead.
a couple quick questions there. Director Franzik, so far, how much funding has been allocated so far to businesses? Have we spent any of that funding so far?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first 2 years we had a lot more applicants.
This year.
This year we have not spent
Yeah,
any,
okay.
but we've had the program for about 2 or 3 years now, and there was just a lot of interest in the marijuana business and all of this at the beginning, so we had a lot more applicants. We've seen a decrease every year. Again, I'm anticipating some applications for this in the next year, but I don't think we'll get to that 90,000. But usually we've gotten pretty close to spending down 80-90% of the funds.
Right. And because on the site it says these social equity grant program funds must be spent on, and we've hit those targets, and employee education, business needs, and community investments. And when you talk about the proposed grant that you're looking to do and not fund the other program at this time, do it. I guess my concern is, how do you pinpoint those organizations or entities that can say that they actually been impacted under the social equity?
For the current grants loan program, they have to have a conviction, or they have to prove to us that someone in their family did. So
Right.
we have them fill out the application, they tell us their charges, we verify it.
Right, but I understand that, but for community investments, that's what I'm talking about. And we're looking at areas where, which is good, I think, paving alleys, in those areas that, have been hit. But when we talk about giving this money or allocating these dollars, and with this new proposal that you're talking about for maybe so many a mile radius or whatever, how are you going to target and make sure that they are the ones that's being impacted by this social equity program?
Well, we're suggesting that they be within a mile radius of a retailer, so that it goes directly into these neighborhoods that have been affected and that have had the marijuana retailers.
Okay.
You guys want to add, Mr. Manager?
Just for clarification, so you're looking at the current state requirements for their program?
Right.
And are you asking that when we devise a program that we take those same criteria into place?
I would think you would follow that same lead, from the state. I mean, since they're the one that implemented. So, that would be my take. To be in compliance.
So I'd have to look to see, and that may make sense. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I do want to provide some contextual background that the Muskegon Marijuana Social Equity Program was done completely separately from the state social equity program. Because the state social equity program was about people wanting to get in the cannabis business and trying to ensure those that had been ensnared by prohibition or otherwise disadvantaged have opportunities to get into the cannabis business, just like you pointed out earlier. Right. Those historical injustices.
Yep.
And so that's what the state program is geared toward, and then the local program had a more broad scope in terms of not just how do we support people getting into the business of cannabis, but how can we help alleviate some of the ills of decades of cannabis prohibition and the war on drugs, which we knew then and know now had been conducted in a way that disproportionately harmed people of color and low-income folks. And so that was kind of more of the focus on a more broad scope with regard to our own City of Muskegon social equity program. And that's why we included the business grants and expungement clinics and the education piece as well.
Right.
So one of the criteria for the state's application is being in a city that was negatively affected. There's a whole list of them, and Muskegon's one of them. So everybody in our community is part of one of those, so they do meet the criteria.
Yeah. And just one more comment, because I know Vice Mayor talked about minority grants and also women, but that should also include, depending on how you look at it, she said minorities could be men too, but I just want to state that for the record, that because if my observation was correct, the ARPA grant, community grant, I don't think any males or black males for a business received any funding. So if we do this here, I want to make sure that we be inclusive and do the same, do what we need to do to make sure people that were impacted, because a large portion of males were incarcerated due to this marijuana prohibition, and particularly men of color and black. And you don't have to be black or a person of color to qualified under this social equity program because it impacted other races also. So just for the record, to let people know that as well.
Thank you, Commissioner
Yeah.
Derwin. So with regard to this business grants that you're looking to, or you're suggesting allocating to 35% towards, and not anything to the grants and loans, are we taking the balance, excuse me if you already answered this and I just missed it earlier, are we taking the balance that remains in the grants/loans category and moving that into the business grants with the new scope? Or are we keeping the funds in the grants/loans category under its original parameters and we're just newly funding business grants?
That's correct. I think we'll be able to spend that grants and loans over this next year. I just don't think we'll be able to spend any more of it.
Okay, gotcha. Just for, this isn't necessarily relevant right now because we got plenty of money in that grant/loans. But when we don't, and we're relying solely on the business grants to provide that support, I would appreciate there still being a caveat that individual applicants who had been negatively impacted by prohibition, meaning they had been incarcerated or a family member, the parameters of our grants and loans, that we still give preference to those individuals, a part of the business grants category. So it's still carrying forward that original spirit, but realizing that we can do good
Yeah.
with a more flexible program.
I think we could write the new grants program to say that people coming over from the grants loans program, if there's no funding, they get first right of refusal and or first dibs at a grant out of that funding.
Okay, so in your mind, you're not necessarily thinking we're going to jettison grants/loans forever. It's just we're not putting any money in right now.
Yeah.
Maybe next year we'll put money into that category.
I'd love
rather
to
than combine the two.
Yeah, I'd love to spend it all this year and then ask for more funding for both programs next year. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think, and as Commissioner German and Vice Mayor St. Clair, Commissioner Koshin have emphasized, I do think it's important to provide that kind of funding, that capital, particularly to members of our community who historically been disadvantaged in accessing capital. Yeah.
There is also two things I forgot to mention, but I'm also looking for okay for. We usually don't have votes for this. It's just kind of I go up here and ask every year. But for that grants loan program that we have the extra funding in, I'm asking that we make the maximum for a business grant, not 5,000 but 10,000 at a time, and that we put a caveat that the grants have to be spent within 18 months. Okay. Otherwise, we can just reallocate that to someone else because we do have a couple out there that are a little old. I think they've probably lost their business plans forward, but
so
writing.
I thought typically we did vote on this. I mean, not at a work session, but you presented at a work session and it was included on a general session, like whether the next one consent or something. I thought that we
I don't think we've ever voted
on this in the past. I'm going to double check the minutes, but okay, for sure.
Usually you ask me what
definitely
I'm
know we
looking
voted
for.
on opening it.
Yes.
I'm almost certain we did. I know we definitely voted when we created it.
Yeah, usually every
funded it.
every
and then
year
we have
I'm-
the yearly updates and whatnot. Because there's been talk of making adjustments over the years, and maybe we didn't formally vote on it last year when we said, "Hey, we want to do this, that, and the other." But I thought we had. But anyhow, okay. So.
And also that I should just mention that new business grant should be 30%, not 35.
Okay. It's like it says 98%, so we need 2% somewhere. Yeah. You gotta get 2 percentage points somewhere to get to 100%.
Well, whatever percentage we need to subtract out there. I'm not
I
gonna
do.
go get it.
I had thrown out at our budget revenue conversation the prospect of divvying up our social, well, not our social equity, divvying up our excise tax revenues that we're receiving between social equity fund, parks and recreation, public safety, and local streets, a quarter each. Still, advocating for that, and we didn't get into discussion around that time. I just put it on the radar and said this is something to reflect on, be mindful of. Although I've changed with regard to local streets and potentially using that quarter to pay for a grant writer and grant coordinator position instead for this year. But I don't know if we want to get into those components right now, or we just do that as the budget. But then we do need to determine whether we're doing 25% or 30% of the social equity program. When the program was first proposed, it was at 35% allocation, and it had been suggested to do a cap of hard dollar cap of like 35,000. And we at that time decided not to do a hard cap. But I don't think at the same time that we ever expected we'd be getting $650,000 in a single year in excise tax revenues. So the numbers have significantly expanded from the initial years. And so,
And I do think we anticipate that this excise tax revenue is going to plateau and then possibly dip a little bit with neighboring states approving recreational marijuana. You're not going to have the cross-border traffic as much. Not sure if that's completely legal, but it happens.
Yeah, you're not supposed to. Crossing state lines,
crossing state
still
lines.
against federal law. Yeah.
But anyhow, I digress. Yeah, so
we welcome the revenue. We don't
Yes.
know what they're doing with it. They're buying it in Michigan. They could be enjoying it solely in Michigan.
That's true. So yeah, this is a very healthy allocation from the state, and it is helpful to the general fund. As I've noted in the past, and I think as Director Grant would also note, the less we chop it up, the better, the more flexible it gives us for our general fund budget. But we work at the will of the commission. So, yes.
And this would all stay in the general fund then. If
Yes.
we did the quarter to general fund instead of local streets, so that quarter to general fund could support ensuring that we have a grant coordinator position in this forthcoming budget. Because last I heard is on the chopping block. And I think it's really important that we hire that grant coordinator position that we've already put through civil service and created. It's just a matter of funding and posting it. And that's why I've suggested using the excise tax revenues to ensure that position is created. But we can get into how to allocate those other pieces, whether public safety or parks and recreation or general fund to support the unrestricted general fund to support that grant writer position another time. What I do want to get some consensus on is whether to move forward with 30% to our social equity program or look to 25%. We have 4 parts of funding, but
Can we increase it later?
we can always increase it later.
Why not start at a quarter?
If we don't, we can do that. And if we want to increase it at a later time, we certainly can. But for this next year, I'm saying 20%.
Oh, are you talking in this budget cycle or like next year or something like that?
Well, they've got extra right now, so
Right.
I think they're doing just fine. So,
Yes.
So
maybe
next year we
next
can up
year.
it.
Okay. I was just gonna say, if it's in this budget cycle, we don't.
He doesn't want to make a bunch of amendments to the budget throughout the year.
That's fair.
Although we
Yeah.
can, but they'd rather not make a bunch of amendments throughout the year. Commissioner Kibble, did you about to ask or add something?
Yeah, I have a question. This is all marijuana tax dollar money?
These are all excise tax revenues.
Yeah. So I have no problem upping at 25, 30. I'm in favor of all of that.
I guess from a budgetary standpoint, I don't know if Mike's gonna come or what Mike's gonna say one way or the other. But if it was 25%, I think that would help us out as we move forward with the budget process. I mean, it wouldn't be a ton of money back in, but it would be
$32,497.50.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are you talking about decreasing it?
So we're talking about putting it at 25% for a
Instead of
social equity
30.
program.
Oh,
Yes.
I think it's more than enough funding. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Commissioner Gorman or German, anything?
Okay, what was that?
We're talking about allocating
Instead of
25% to the social equity program, which would be $162,487.50 to the overall social
As
equity.
of right now, we're doing 30.
Right now, yes, it had been 30% for the last year. We're getting more total dollars this year than we had last year. This is the record amount that we've gotten this year. So even at 25% of the new amount, it's pretty close to the 30% of last year's amount.
I mean, I think we should just keep it at 30. That's just my.
I would advocate, just because it's general fund dollars, that if we can contribute more into the general fund to do our general operations, that $32,000 would be helpful for us as we go through the budget process.
Okay,
And
but
we're talking, and Commissioner Cochin sounds like should be amenable to doing it this year, knowing that because we have excess funds from previous year,
Right.
and that next year we can move it back up to 35 or 35% or whatnot, depending on how the spend down of this year's dollars play out. So if we are limited reserve next year, and we want to continue the programming to the same extent, we can up the percentage next year.
and the reason probably why it's down because a lot of again, citizens don't know that these funds are available, and I think we need to make more of a conscious effort to get it out there because I have constituents and other businesses, calling me, asking me about, when are these dollars going to be available, and some of them don't even know. So, and I understand, to take some of the stress off of the general fund, but these dollars were specifically for social equity and to do the things that impacted people of color, anyone that had records from the prohibition of marijuana, just to take those funds and allocate it somewhere else. I mean, there could be other sources where we can get those dollars to add to the general fund as well.
I was going to say that. So the excise tax is general fund revenue in general,
right?
And then the commission had decided what percentage of that to adjust year over year,
right? Which was,
but the whole bucket of money that's coming in from the excise tax goes into the
general fund,
yeah,
right? But
yeah.
what we're going to allocate to social equity was 30%. Right?
30%, yeah.
Yep.
And I respect if you want to keep it at that. I mean,
I'm putting 30%.
Commissioner Gorman, do you have thoughts on 25% versus 30%?
Fine with 25, sure.
Before I go to Commissioner Kogo, I just want to, because Vice Mayor St. Clair has stepped away when we had that conversation, so I just want to go give you an opportunity to weigh in before I go back to Commissioner Kogo.
I stepped away.
Yeah.
Tell me what you're.
Oh, it's talking about
Wait, what am
25%.
I waiting
Oh, I
for?
thought you were maybe had been hearing the conversation
I
as
heard
you were
some
stepping
of it,
away.
but not all of it.
It's with regard to allocating 25% of our excise tax dollars to the social equity program for this year. You can reflect on that, and I'll go to Commissioner Kilgo.
I'm gonna save mine. I'll have a conversation off of the ice.
Okay. Offline. All right. Well, sounds like we at least have a majority of the commission that supports 25%, and that's without Vice Mayor St. Clair even weighing in. So, I think there's enough consensus to move forward with 25%.
All right.
On that. And then we can have a subsequent conversation with regard to what to do with the other 75%, whether to keep it unrestricted in the general fund, or if we want to earmark a certain percentage to Parks and Recreation or Public Safety or that grant writer. I want that grant writer. I want that grant coordinator position. All right. Thanks for your work on that. Final thought. Oh,
just one more thing. Are we okay if I work on a contract with Guns and Mediation Restorative Services to come back at a subsequent meeting for their funding?
Mediation Restorative Services is the only bidder for that contract.
Yeah, they were.
I think that's perfectly appropriate to say you did great work. We want to renew with you. I can see that for Guns as well. If they've done excellent work, why would we not want to continue with them?
They have one planned for June as well.
The only caveat is, potentially engaging Indigro and Timber and Great Lakes Expansion Network, because I also think they did great work.
I'll reach out back to them and see if they have any interest in moving forward.
And just seeing what that looks like.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Finally, Commissioner German. In my remarks earlier, I did not mean to minimize your work or passion around social equity and the cannabis field. You definitely have advocated around social equity in the cannabis industry. You did at that time. You've done it subsequently. I know that you have engaged with the prior city manager on that. I think that did help inform his initial draft of the social equity program. But I wanted to emphasize and give credit to Commissioner Warren for being the one to really spearhead and champion the social equity program that we created. So you've definitely advocated around social equity in general in the cannabis industry. But I really just wanted to acknowledge Commissioner Warren around that social
Oh.
equity program.
Most definitely.
In Muskegon.
Yeah,
So I just
yeah,
wanted to
yeah,
clarify.
Right. And I
apologize
think
if
the
there's misunderstanding what I was
that's what I was
trying
going
to
to say.
convey.
Just breakdown in communication. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner
Yeah,
German.
thank you. Yeah.
Next up, we have sale of 12.87 acres at 2675 Olthoff Drive to Blue Water Industrial Development, LLC. Welcome. Could you please introduce yourself?
Good evening. I am Jake Eckholm. I'm the Director of Development Services for the City of Muskegon.
Good evening.
So tonight we have just sort of a work session to go over the concept. We're asking for a vote on the purchase agreement tomorrow. So we have an active industrial expansion project that we're entertaining. Blue Water Industrial Development is proposing to construct a 215,000 square foot facility as an expansion to an existing City of Muskegon industrial business. I'm going to caveat this ahead of time. I'm not using names and because there is a certain amount of proposed state participation with assistance on this project, and until the state agency that's relevant to the project makes the announcement, they prefer that we not give these types of details. So we're in an unusual position in that we're trying to sell public property for the expansion, which is not always the case. This is a piece, I printed it out on 11 by 17. You should have it at your desks. So that is the surveyed parcel that we would be breaking off from the larger West Shore Correctional Facility parcel, which this is 12.87 acres of the remaining approximately 40 acres. So the proposed 215,000 square foot facility would support between 75 and 125 jobs over the next 3 years. And again, the industry is plastics extrusion, so it would be a plastics plant making logistics parts that serve the automotive industry primarily.
Thank you, Director Eckholm. But merge your first and last name. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Kogo.
Yeah, so just for clarification, the sale price of the property would be $130,000?
Yes, that's reflective of our active list price of 10,000 per acre at the site.
Perfect. And one more time, approximately provide how many local jobs?
Between 75 and 125 over the next 3 years. Their commitment letter in exchange for incentives is 72, but that's a conservative estimate because they have to hit certain benchmarks to achieve some of the assistance that I was referring to. And so usually people give very conservative estimates for those programs.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Kogo. Any other questions? This is on our agenda tomorrow night.
There's a couple more things I'd like to cover on like the particulars of the sale. I just wanted to make sure there were no questions on the project first, just so you know.
Any questions about the project? None? All right, process. Oh, Commissioner Cochin.
Yes. You said that this is going to be it's going to be connected to a current industrial entity, is that correct?
It's an expansion of an existing business, but it's a separate footprint. So they will maintain their existing operations and then have a new facility, which is not unusual in the Port City Industrial Park. We have several entities out there that have multiple locations in the same industrial park.
I understand. And then because of funding that they're getting from the state, we can't know what that other entity is, correct?
I can say so offline. I would rather not say in a public meeting.
10-4, thank you.
Any other questions on the project itself? No. Process, please.
Sure. So one particularly interesting and innovative item that we're doing with this development is Blue Water's been great to work with. This is our first time working with them. They're an industrial contractor, builds industrial buildings. The site itself, the way it's laid out, is adequate for the expansion and the necessary parking and trucking needs. But we would have had a hard time with stormwater retention. And so what we proposed is, for those of you that have been out there to the expansion to the Port City Industrial Park, we constructed an extension to Olthoff Drive that ends in a cul-de-sac. And so immediately to the south of that cul-de-sac, we're going to propose parceling off several acres from the remaining property that we're not selling to Blue Water, and having them at their cost, when they implement their building construction, construct a common stormwater retention pond that will also serve the remaining developable acreage out there. that will do a few things for us. The existing outfall in that area is in the northeast of the site, about as far away as it can possibly get from this area. And then also there's another attraction project that is already under construction in the way. So that would have been very costly and logistically difficult to access that outfall. And so the goal will be to engineer a settling pond, a stormwater infiltration pond that meets all necessary state requirements for settling and infiltration, and also be a shared common amenity at the park. And so and what this does is it allows more users to have stormwater retention as we sell the remaining acreage off, and will require people to connect that as a condition of sale. And the way that will work is Blue Water will fund it up front, and then as new users close on properties that the city owns, what will happen is they will reimburse Blue Water for a proportional share of that cost of the pond based on the acreage that they buy. And so, and then at the beginning, at the onset, what we propose is that Blue Water will maintain that pond, which basically in this context means mow around it, with their existing landscaping contract. So we will contract them to maintain the pond. Once another entity closes on a piece of property out there that would connect to the pond, they are released of their obligation to maintain it for us, and we can bid that out or take it in-house, whatever we decide at that time, which could be tomorrow, it could be several years from now.
Commissioner Kilgo?
Sorry, a follow-up question. There's enough room south of this parcel before, you said Fruitport Township owns south of this parcel?
We own it, but what's fascinating is, so the former West Shore Correctional Facility actually straddled two municipal jurisdictions. So the northern and western portion were in the city of Muskegon, and the southern third approximately was in Fruitport Township jurisdictionally. We own the land, it sits in Fruitport Township. So staff is working with Fruitport Township now on a draft, what's called a 425 multi-jurisdictional agreement. So that's where two municipalities collaborate on who gets what share of the tax base generated based on their millage rates without going through a formal annexation, which is where you actually formally change which municipality a piece of property sits in. So everybody would like to avoid that. It's costly and usually controversial. And so a 425 agreement is seen as a more collaborative option. So the pond would sit on that acreage. There's I think something like 28 acres right there, and we think the pond will take up approximately 3 acres. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? No? All right. We'll be voting on this tomorrow evening in our general session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ekholm. That brings us to public comment. We've got a few forms for people to address us in person. There's an opportunity to give public comment by phone as well. It's been a minute. I don't remember the number. It was 231-727-724-6771.
6721.
You know, this needs to be written right here. I need to write this and put a post-it.
On your screen right now.
All right. So be prepared for that phone number. Don't call just yet, but I do want to share it. 231-724-6721, right? Yeah, okay. Anyhow, we're going to go to in-person comment first. And we have Paula Ray joining us from the Nelson neighborhood. Welcome.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Doing pretty well, thank you. You have up to 3 minutes to provide your remarks.
Okay, I'll talk fast. I am the Fine Art, Fine Craft Coordinator for Lakeshore Art Festival. I have been working this festival for 30 years, which is almost half my life. We know what we're doing. We run a great show. We have won Sunshine Artist Top 200 in the United States, the Best Art Fair in 2019 from Art Fair Calendar, Pure Michigan Award. Last year we got Grand Haven Tribune's People's Choice Award. We've had international art come to this town in permanent display. The Kelsey Montague Butterfly at the Frauenthal Center, and David Zinn's little acorn cellar at the farmer's market. I think those are great assets, and we did that. We also have an international artist and educator in Mark Rumsey, who is our show juror. He does decide who gets our prizes. A lot of our artists have been here for 30 years. The reason is we run a good show. I hope if it's taken over by someone else, they would be encouraged to engage with our key players and keep us doing what we do best. Time and time again, 98% of our artist reviews say, well-organized show, great hospitality, love the friendliness of the crew. It's what we do. You can't just say, I'm going to do 10 jewelers, 10 painters, throw them in the spaces. You need to know artistic processes. I worked at the Art Museum for 14 years. I know a little bit. It's crucial, and I don't want to lose this show for this city. So I hope they will take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining us this evening, Ms. Paula, and your 30 years of commitment to that event. Next up, we have Jamie Cross joining us from the NIMS neighborhood. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes to provide your remarks.
I'm going to be direct. 4 points, Hartshorn. First point, yesterday, Mother's Day, my daughter's visiting from Oregon. I went down to Hartshorn. It was barricaded. Barricaded by Adelaide Point developer. Barricaded 4 days earlier, the mayor told me it would never be barricaded. Barricaded. It is in violation of the PUD that you passed for the Hartshorn Village update. Barricaded. 2, let's talk about the docks at Hartshorn that the Adelaide Point developer put in. The docks that he's calling boats because he doesn't have a permit from the state. Docks that you passed the commission with a condition that it be passed by the state. 3, the bike path. In January of 2023, when the dry rack marina was passed by the commission, it was an obligation to elevate the bike path where it gets wet, in the wetland area. This year, 3 times, 3 meetings, you requested the bike path permit be submitted. It's not submitted. The dry rack marina is finished. It's in use. Bikers are skirting around. They're going through the development. That was a big thing. 4, the most recent meeting you had on 4/30, that special meeting that was in some little place somewhere, not really notified to people that really are concerned about Hartshorn. That meeting in which you passed something in 8 minutes for an easement for the developer to be able to get water to his dry rack. Does the commission know that there is a lawsuit between Adelaide Point and their contractor, and that the city is getting into the middle of it and for the developer so he can open his dry rack? I see the mayor shaking his head. I would like any dispute, and I would like some transparency that it became a special meeting. It should have waited. It should have waited for a commission meeting at the very minimum. I voted for a number of you. I will not vote for you again until something changes. One of you has had Mac's campaign funds from Ryan Leedsma and Matt's campaign funds from Emily Leedsma. I see yeses up here all the time. He gets what he wants, but he doesn't do anything for the community. Time to make changes.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Next up, we have Leah Leroy joining us from the Nelson neighborhood.
Good evening. My initial comments will be on behalf of the Muskegon Lake Watershed Partnership. Variety of concerns. I'm going to be a little bit generic, but a few specific points. So the transition from mostly working waterfront to a more recreational focused multi-use waterfront is not without pains. It's something that we need to anticipate, not only the opportunities of the waterfront, but also some of the challenges that we're going to encounter as these developments take place. One thing I think that the commission needs to take consideration of is to create an ordinance regarding the use of our public bottomlands, as well as use of public infrastructure adjoining those bottomlands. You need to research and propose reasonable legislation. As we become more of a marine community, you're going to find that there are going to be a lot of opportunities for folks to use spaces that they did not use before, and we need to anticipate them and legislate accordingly. We need to have consistency, and we need to have outreach to educate people as to what those regulations are and how they can use their waterfront without infringing on those ordinances, which I think that we need to review and pass. I think it is also an onus on the city staff to ensure that any current agreements pertaining to public properties are updated in advance of further approvals and that they are clear with appropriate mapping so that all plans reflect the latest developments and there is no confusion going forward. And those are my comments on behalf of the Watershed Partnership. A few personal comments about agenda items today. There was a recommendation for excess funding to be used with particular programming. I think that we should consider enhancing our employment opportunities for youth between the ages of about 15 to 22. If we want to have citizens participating in meaningful ways, having good jobs, being residents, buying houses. They need skills, they need jobs, they need to be seen as part of our community. And I especially think that teenagers and young adults in those 18 to 22 years, we want to see them doing good things. And so supporting some of these parks that we are investing in would be great. You know, having parks that are well maintained and that people have pride in because they have spent their summer as seasonal employees. I think that's really an opportunity that you have as a city to make people visible and employed. Also, I think on a personal note, we can save a lot of unnecessary time and conflict of interest by removing prayer from our general session. I think that what you actually do is require that staff as well have to basically publicly protest in order to not participate, and you don't do it in all of your meetings, so it is not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leroy. Appreciate you joining us this evening. Next up, we have John R. Allen joining us from the Nelson neighborhood. Welcome, sir. You have 3 minutes to provide your remarks.
All right. First off, just good evening. Hope everyone's doing well. I would like to say, in follow-up, as awful as it was that it was barricaded off, city and city staff, thank you for removing and upholding the conditions of the PUD, at least currently, by removing the barricades put in place. On Friday, I watched the Adelaide Point employees move and place city property signage and the cement barricades that completely blocked the primary access road into Hartshorn Park, which was in direct violation and juxtaposition to the ideas of public access and the conditions of the approved planned unit development. They did this to try and force all traffic through Adelaide Boulevard, amongst other beneficial reasons for the private development only. Thank you for instructing the Adelaide Point developer to remove these unpermitted barricades and roadblocks today. I also therefore officially request that in the future this commission allows no changes or amendments to be made to the Adelaide Point PUD that would ever restrict any form of public access down this road. Thank you for upholding the easements placed in the PUD that represent the interest of the public, and please continue to uphold these conditions without variance. In that light, I will transition to and speak and request that you guide and direct city staff to uphold the Adelaide Point PUD conditions for their in and out service operations. For clarity, I still vehemently oppose Adelaide Point's private use of public land for boat launching operations, especially at one of the most important points of public access on the south shoreline of Muskegon Lake. Despite the overwhelming opposition from residents and visitors alike, this operation has been allowed to progress forward and is now currently operating in a hazardous manner, represented by what Jamie said with the loophole of calling them boats. These operations are occurring at the expense of the public and their access despite any approval or permitting from Eagle to this point. But moreover, Adelaide Point is operating on public property despite the prerequisite conditions of applying for, at bare minimum, and the completed raising of the bike path that goes through Hartshorn Park wetlands areas. I do believe the words prerequisite and conditions of approval speak for themselves. These conditions, including the most basic of the conditions being the very first step of just applying for a permit to raise the bike path, have not been met. While many of us disagree wholeheartedly with the operations occurring here and hope things will change there, if this is somehow going to be allowed, the developers should absolutely be required to meet and or ideally succeed even part, but I would say all of the conditions approved in these PUDs and their amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Appreciate you joining this evening. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to give public comment at this time? We are going to go to the phones. That's 231-724-6721.
There we have somebody calling.
All right.
I'll see a name.
Hello, you are joining the City of Muskegon City Commission. Hello, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Miss Eleanor Cantor joining us from the NIMS neighborhood. Welcome. You have up to 3 minutes to provide your remarks.
Thank you. For over 10 years, I have brought one message to the City Commission consistently. That message is that the city needs to find a way to work with the disability community instead of finding people willing to excuse the city's responsibilities under the law. For the past 40 years, the ramp at Cruzy Park has provided the city's only accessible Lake Michigan beachfront. That outcome was a compromise solution. Instead of spreading resources across every beachfront, the city committed to building and maintaining a fully accessible beachfront at Cruzy Park. So when the city relies on non-disabled, self-appointed experts to excuse themselves from providing even a single access point to the Big Lake, that is a problem. Requiring disabled people to attend an in-person event at a park that the city recognizes is not currently accessible is fully weird. The city has, unfortunately, created a feedback process that is clearly designed to put the civil rights of disabled residents up for a vote by the general populace. There is no way for a minority to secure the majority of public opinion. The city, knowing there is no way for a minority to secure the majority of public opinion, the city seeks to excuse its noncompliance with the ADA as community-driven. For that reason, I created a petition for the community to express support for restoring access at Cruzy Park. I do not personally want to hear any discussion about additional amenities until the ramp and accessible landing have been restored. The petition can be accessed at change.org/cruzy access. That's KRUSEACCESS. A fully accessible path of travel must be the first requirement as outlined by the ADA. The city recently handed out millions of dollars in ARPA funding to third-party entities. Every year, the city spends its entire ADA budget on pet projects that are already required to be accessible under current federal regulation. So the excuse that the city simply cannot afford to create or even maintain accessibility on its properties carries little weight.
Thank you,
I
Ms.
currently have
Cantor. We appreciate you phoning in your comments this evening. We have another caller?
There was somebody trying to call in, yes.
Okay. If you tried calling, you can call again. The number is 231-724-6721.
we go. Mayor, it's Eileen Hoogterp. Eileen
Hoogterp?
Eileen.
Eileen.
There you go.
Are you on
Hello?
the line, Eileen?
I am.
Welcome, Eileen. You are calling into the City Commission of Muskegon work session. You have up to 3 minutes to provide your remarks. And could you share, if you are a resident of the city, which neighborhood you might be calling from? And if you're not a resident, what city, township, or village you may be calling from?
Yes. So I live in the city of Norton Shores and grew up in the city of Muskegon.
Excellent. Thank you, Eileen. Can we reset the clock? Eileen, you have 3 minutes to provide your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to concur with all the comments Jamie Cross provided this evening, that it is time to make changes. All of her points were excellent and well submitted. The bike path is just in terrible condition. Meetings that take place and don't have public access, that the transparency, please, why votes are taken and then things are changed. And that was completely evident this weekend when people were trying to use the parking lot of the public access Hartshorn Marina to view the northern lights. And within 24 hours time met with barricades, and they had no access to go down there to do that. That is not acceptable according to all the PUDs and all these other documents that you have constructed. I would also concur with all the comments of John R. Allen in that the commission needs to say one thing and do the same thing, and not say one thing and do the opposite. I would say I have not heard the term that Muskegon is now a marine community. Whatever happens to those of us who grew up here and we have no access to any lakeshore anymore unless we have lots of money. We can't go where there's just an easy way to walk, just like down at Pier Marquette. As the woman who was just speaking about that, it's a challenge. It is a challenge. You can't find a parking space. Now you're taking away Hartshorn because you're doing these things with Adelaide Point. It is not acceptable to cut off at the knees people with accessibility issues, people with low funding that need these places to go not only for relaxation, but sometimes for their food. They fish, and they need that to support their family and and those that are underprivileged. So please do what you're supposed to do and make these changes to the betterment of the people of Muskegon who've lived here their whole life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miss Eileen. Appreciate you calling in.
Thank you.
The caller's not. We'll give a few more minutes. 231-724-6721. All right. Any other callers?
No, Mayor.
Nope. All right. Well, that concludes public comment. With regard to Hartshorn and the barricade has been removed. It was put up over the weekend, and I had conversations with our staff as well as the developer who put it up over the weekend. There's some confusion around the ability to put that up and to influence access there, and the intent was for to improve traffic flow and safety of the users of that particular area. Now, to be clear, even with the barricade that had gone up on the private driveway, the Hartshorn launch ramp and parking lot was accessible the whole time. It was accessible through Adelaide Boulevard, which is a new road that was constructed and paid for by Adelaide Point. That is publicly accessible, and you could access Hartshorn launch ramp and parking lot the entire time. Now, be that as it may, I did confirm my recollection by going to the minutes when we approved the plan unit development for the second amendment to the plan unit development for Hartshorn Village, which I believe was February 14th, 2023. And it does require the driveway to be publicly accessible as well as putting a sidewalk in. And so I did have conversations with staff as well as the developer today to make it clear that I believe it is part of my responsibility as chair of the commission to ensure that the commission's will and directions are faithfully upheld. In which case, the PUD does call for that driveway from Western Avenue to Hartshorn to be publicly accessible, as well as a sidewalk going in. And so the barricade was removed today. Whether that is the permanent fate or future, that remains to be seen. It could be well enough that there's a strong rationale for changes to be made and it to be brought to the commission, and it'll be the discretion of the commission to decide whether or not that PUD should be modified accordingly. But for the time being, the PUD approved by this commission specifies that that privately owned driveway shall be publicly accessible. And I consider that to include vehicles by virtue of it being driveway, but also in the context of it to access Hartshorn launch ramp, which the primary purpose for accessing the Hartshorn launch ramp is to bring a trailer with a boat. Hence, access includes vehicular access to that driveway. Now, I do just wanted to clarify that because there is some confusion around the barricaded situation. There is no barricade there. Presently, I drove by there earlier. It has been removed. Which, with regard to bike path, I've also had conversations around that, both with staff as well as with the developer, surrounding the need to raise the bike path through the wetland area, which has been that way for years, decades. And so, as part of this overall development, there was a requirement that that be raised, and then a subsequent amendment that it be applied for a permit to raise that through Eagle. Now, the conversation I've been having recently is that there may be a way to raise it without disturbing the wetland area and thus negating the need for an Eagle permit to proceed with that. That remains to be seen, and staff will bring forward what's appropriate in concert with the developer. But I share that just so it's known that staff and the developer is looking at that issue. It's not being ignored or relegated. It is being looked at, and a potential solution may be brought forward, hopefully, sooner than later, that we can provide access through that portion of the wetlands without disturbing or harming the wetlands, and getting people's access to the bike trail out of the water. Now, with regard to the meeting, the special meeting was on April 30th. We had a couple items on that agenda. One of which with regard to appointments to our Citizens District Council, and then with regard to establishing an easement at Adelaide Point with regard to a water main. Our city manager did provide a number of questions and answers to us earlier today, because we've received some questions and comments and some misunderstandings around that, particularly people thinking that we are, one, did not hold a proper public meeting. We did. Two, that we did this to put our fingers on the scale of justice or intervene or insert ourselves with regard to lawsuit. That's not true. And that there was otherwise impropriety that happened at that meeting, also without any legitimacy. However, our city manager did submit or share with us a number of questions and answers earlier today. I want to give him an opportunity if he wants to read any of those, or if you want me to read them, because I do think there's good information in there that we received, and I think our community should have that information as well.
Sure. I'll hit some of the. There's 9 questions here, but I'm just going to hit a couple of them. So one of the questions was, how does this impact the legal action between the contractor and the developer? Did the city take a side in this dispute? The easement that we obtained does not impact the legal action between the contractor and the developer, which are 2 private businesses, and the city did not take a side of one or the other in this instance. And I did have a couple conversations with legal counsel just to confer a couple of different points in that regard. But in general, the response there is we did not take a side. Is this easement an unusual step? No, it is not. Cities throughout the state use this tool when there's a development project that has multiple phases before construction is completed. We have neighboring cities here in West Michigan that use the same type of easement when underground assets are completed and the city wants to control part of a project that is connected to other city assets, which is also one of the reasons that city staff was recommending moving forward with the easement. We were going to be responsible for this pipe in the long run, and the sooner that we are the ones in control of it, the better, as it is connected into our water system. Did the city of Muskegon take out an insurance policy to back up the developer's legal standing? No, we did not. The title company for Adelaide Point, TransNation Title, took out an insurance policy at the city's request for an amount equal to the lien that the contractor is trying to enforce against the developer. Was the easement the only option? No. City staff provided the developer with 3 options. The city did not direct a specific outcome and only provided these options. They were to work with the contractor and have the contractor sign a waiver noting that the water line was not part of the lien claim, for the developer to pay the amount to the contractor and have the lien lifted in that manner, or to provide the city of Muskegon with an easement that included insurance for the amount due to the contractor. Why did the city provide these options at all? Because these are legal options, and the city was asked what the options were. We would have been putting our finger on the scale without offering options. Now, if there were options, we would have just said there are not options. Isn't the water line part of the lien? Does the developer really own it, and can it give an easement? And this, I had a longer conversation with our attorney on this point. The takeaway is the liens related to work completed on the project and not the water line specifically, although that was part of the work. AP, or the developer, has the legal authority to issue the easement over that property. The easement was initially drafted by the developer's attorney. Our attorneys at Parmenter reviewed it, and then, as with any legal document, both sides gave feedback. And then, why did we have a special meeting? This item was originally on the April 23rd City Commission agenda. However, legal counsel and staff had asked for a few more tweaks to the agreement before it was brought to the commission for approval. This occurred the same day as the meeting. I, as the manager, decided not to give the commission a legal document for approval before the meeting, as I didn't think it would be enough time to review. Because of this, a special meeting seemed the most appropriate way forward. So those are a summary of some of the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. All right. So I just wanted to provide some context, insights, information to improve understanding around a few of those items that had been raised. So, in which case, I don't see anyone showing up for additional public comment in the audience, and we haven't got any more phone calls, in which case I would entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, motion by Commissioner Kilgo, supported by Commissioner Cochin to adjourn. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you. Take
At the South Haven Lighthouse, winds were south at 4 knots and the temperature was 62 degrees.